So we are here to talk about brotherhood. I know a lot of times you come to a guys session, you're like, okay, they're going to tell me how I've been such a terrible, man of God, and I have these terrible habitual sins, and all of that already. And we talk about that not as like it's not important, but I want us to talk about something that seems rather foundational, but it's hidden. Because so many times when we do like a guys session, it becomes this personal, here's what I'm struggling with in isolation, by myself, on the weekend, in the bedroom, online, wherever it is, right? It's like, it's my problem and I feel so isolated. But this hidden reality is that we were not created to be on this earth by ourselves. We were created to be in relationship. And when we talked about last night with Adam and Eve, they were meant to be in relationship with each other, right? That's why we have this great desire to be in relationship, especially when relationship with someone else at an intimate level. Because that's how Adam and Eve were created. They're created to be in an intimate relationship with each other. But we know there's all kinds of lies that the devil tells us that get in the way of that. There's all kinds of confusion. We've lost the sense, I believe, of what true masculinity is, because we've also lost the sense of what true brotherhood looks like. This isn't just how I am with, my significant other or my future wife or my girlfriend. It's not this isn't just the reality of you're in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex. This is how can we have authentic brotherhood? How can we have bold friendships, or should I say fearless brotherhood? And I love today we're going to kind of Father Jonathan, ladies and gentlemen, he's running tech. So good. That's so good. I mean, it's like a Jedi. Just at that moment, he shows up, hands me my lightsaber. It's so good. Today, I'm going to use a couple proverbs to kind of frame up this talk for us today. And the first one, Here. And just like Proverbs 17:17 says, a brother is born for the time of adversity. They get it. It's written in their DNA. My brother needs, this is my kids at home, by the way. My brother needs help, and so I'm going to help him. I'm going to lay my life down on this disgusting floor so you can reach. Now, we hope that boys like this will grow into be brothers like this. What starts on a bathroom floor can actually translate on the battlefield. And that's really just about brotherhood. It's sacrificing yourself for someone else. Now, if we compare and contrast, last night we talked about Adam and Jesus. But if we think about the way they approached relationships, Adam became weak. He abdicated or gave away his masculinity. He blamed it on the woman, when they asked, why did you eat it? He's like, she made me. He gave away his power and his strength, his authority. He stopped leading. And then Jesus shows up, and what's one of the first, what he does in the scriptures, the first thing Jesus does? In all four of the Gospels, do you know what the first thing is he does? He calls friends around himself. He calls the 12. Brotherhood was super important to Jesus. And so his type of leadership was one that was bold, sacrificial, strong, courageous. He called friends around him. This is really, if you think about it, this is what he wanted on the night he died. Now, his friends, did they carry him around no, we'll fight till the end? No, they scattered. And maybe you can relate to that. We look at that authentic picture of masculinity. We look at this picture of brotherhood I want to do that for you. I want to do that for another. But would you be able to? Would you be able to? Have you been that kind of friend to someone else? Well, I tell you what, I went on this little excursion a couple years ago. It was called a Tough Mudder. So on this Tough Mudder, I had a couple friends that invited me to do it, and one was a doctor. So like the doctor, I'm good. Like if a doctor's going, it must be okay. I like the laughter. Oh yeah, good thought. Thank you. But here's the crazy thing. I thought I was in good shape. And I showed up, and it was 12 miles of running with 20 obstacles along the way. And the idea of this race was not to finish first. It was not a race for first. It was a race for completion. And the only way you could finish the race was if you used your brothers. If you allowed them to help you and lead. Because there were certain obstacles that took everybody to pass. Well, we came up to the second obstacle. My wife, by the way, she was a little leery of me going on this because she'd seen a lot of videos and promo stuff about some of the things that happen in a Tough Mudder. And she said to me, I'm okay with you going as long as you don't do the electricity obstacle. Okay, fine. You don't have to convince me. That's fine. I won't do the electricity obstacle. So we go on this race, and it starts off, and they want you to get muddy right away. Like, because you show up and you're like, ooh, and then by 5 minutes later, you're covered in mud and you don't worry about it. They wanted you to get muddy right away. And we completed these really muddy obstacles, like you could hardly tell. We didn't even look human anymore. We looked like we had emerged from the swamp. And the third obstacle on this race was called the Arctic Enema. Now, if you don't know what an enema is, I'm going to ask you to ask your brother later, but that did not sound fun to me. But this Arctic Enema was a storage container, those big metal storage containers, filled with water and ice. And on one end was a platform that you had to jump into the water and ice and get across the other side of the storage container. Now, most of you are thinking, I want to cheat the system, right? I want to jump as far as I can so I have less distance to swim. So they put a wall up in the middle of it. So you have to swim underneath the wall. And the ice is 2.5 feet deep. And so I watched my doctor friend get up there, jump in, swim to the other side. And I'm next. And I asked him, Doc, any tips? You know what his one tip was? Go fast. And so, that is not me, by the way. But this is an example of what this Arctic Enema looks like. He had to jump in, swim under this wall, and swim to the other side. My body locked up. And I started to realize why there was an ambulance and medical personnel sitting on the other side of the tank. I made it to the other side. I got out, and I'm like, thank goodness my wife didn't know about this obstacle. So we go on in the race. We get to the very end. We'd been on this race for 3 hours. 3 hours to do this race. And so we come to the final, and I can, we see where those exit signs are? Just kind of turn around and look at the exit signs. It says, finish. There's the finish line. And imagine right where you are is the final obstacle. The electroshock therapy obstacle. Now, how many of you, by a show of hands, say, I've gone this far, I'm doing the electroshock therapy? How many of you are you're stupid, you're crazy, just walk around it? No judgment here. Let me tell you, I felt the judgment. There was a few people walking around. It was people in that were handicapped or in a wheelchair or or people that were, you could just tell had done it before and were hurt. Literally, those were the people that were going around. They had people of all kinds of walks of life on this Tough Mudder because it was really about finishing it together. I had to judge, do I run through this to get to the finish line or do I walk around it and get to the finish line? And my wife's voice is in my ear, you can do it all except the electricity. And then I watched one of my CrossFit friends run through. And then I watched the doctor run through. And I see a doctor running through and I see more ambulances. I'm like, surely this is a safe place, I got a doctor. And so I have a video I'd like to show you. Not of me, by the way, because I couldn't find it. But I want you to see for 30 seconds what this obstacle looks like before I've decided whether I'm going to run through or not. So take a look. So did anybody change their mind like I'm not doing the electricity? Raise your hand if you changed your mind. 1, 2 people, 3 people. They were all adults, by the way. I did it. Now, I didn't say it was smart, but I did it. I took the risk. Like, I realized I needed to go help my brother who got knocked down 5 times by the electricity. I prayed as I went through it. I was praying a Hail Mary. I ran all the way through it, and this is very disappointing, but I didn't get shocked. Now, I'm not saying it was a great idea, but see, when I'm thinking about friendship, I'm not thinking about like helping my friends do stupid things, but there was a bond that formed between me and these guys through that whole race, right? Where at the end, I'm like, they're going to do it, I'm in with them. Do you have friends like that in your life? You might have heard C.S. Lewis. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. He's got these 4 stages of love. Storge, philia, eros, and agape. So storge is the familial love. It's the love that you have in your family, right? It's not like, I know you've got siblings, like I've got, kids too, and their relationship's kind of weird. Like when one of them like goes missing for a little while, or they can't find them, or has hurt their feelings, they're sad, and then there's another time where they're beating them up, right? But family relationships are complicated, right? But there is a certain kind of love that exists in families. Philia, which we're going to talk about, this is like brotherly friendship, brotherly love. And I believe the reason I've kind of highlighted that one, it's the one I want to talk about because I think this one we've forgotten about. Because everything has become eros. Everything has become this like eroticized love, this like twisted version of love. And not eros by itself is twisted. But when we lump everything into erotic love, when everything has to be erotic or weird, then we don't have a balance with some of the others. Yes, erotic love exists in a marriage. There is that element of erotic love in a marriage where you give yourself completely vulnerably to someone else. And then agape, the last love, of course, the love that God has for us, which we're striving for. If we could love people the way God loved us, this would be a perfect world. So C.S. Lewis had a name for what we call this brotherly love. And of course we have the great philosopher Aristotle had 3 kinds of friendship. And he lived like 2,000 years before C.S. Lewis, great Greek philosopher. His 3 types were utility, pleasure, and excellence. And it's kind of a continuum, like the deeper you go into relationship, you travel through these 3. So just to give you an example, utility is about the usefulness. Do you have people in your life that you have like a useful relationship with? I didn't say using, but useful. The good side of this would be like if they help you with homework or if they're helping you like in a sport. Like there's some sort of usefulness to the relationship, which is a lot of times there's certain relationships in our lives that stay there, right? Do you have that person you text every time you need homework help? Or are you the person? Or are you the person that they text for homework help? Right? Now, the bad side of this would be if it's manipulative or using, like if you're using the other person for something. Then you move into pleasure. There are relationships in our life where they are pleasure relationships. The good side of this, which I think we've lost sight of, is like when you share similar interests or hobbies or sports. Like maybe they're on your sports team and you wouldn't call it useful because they're not making you a better player, but you enjoy going and doing this activity with this person. The bad side of that is when we take things like eros love from C.S. Lewis and we make that the pleasurable side, and we're going to have people in a relationship just for our sexual or intimate pleasure. Or then we lose the whole idea of masculinity when we think that like if I'm hanging out with my brothers, it has to be weird or erotic. And that's what society wants to tell us today. The culture wants to push this agenda onto you instead of what does real, true, authentic, masculine brotherhood look like today. And then finally, if you get to that excellent relationship, there's no bad side of it. This is only good. This is sacrificial and lasting love and friendship. So if you take Aristotle's excellence and put that on top of C.S. Lewis's philia, one of his four loves, you have what authentic brotherhood looks like, and you have an image again of the cross. Because Jesus hung on that cross out of love for us, and he gave himself completely for that. Here's the other proverb I wanted to share with you. You've heard this one before. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Ever heard that one before? Well, let me tell you about an example in my house. So I came home, and my kids were in the living room downstairs, and they were talking, and they had some friends, and they were talking. And I walked in their room, and I heard shh, 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 shh. I thought nothing of it. It's all good. I mean, that shh gave it away, right? Something's going on. They're hatching some sort of plan. I walk upstairs, and they said, just don't touch anything. And I walk upstairs in the game room, and I find this. Now, I want you to think about if you were a little boy downstairs in the living room hatching a plan, and upstairs this was going on. Fill in the gaps. What is about to happen here? I mean, it's like written in your bones. Like it's written in who you are. You're like, war's about to happen. That's exactly what happened. Okay? So they were basically drawing numbers as to who would go upstairs first and choose their weapon. Now, you might not know what one of those things is, but it looks like this. It's a fluorescent light bulb that's filled with toxic gas. And when it breaks, that's the first time I've gotten that reaction. This is great. This is great. So what could go wrong with a tube of glass filled with toxic glass when we start battle? I mean, back to this, right? This is the message I'm trying to send to my children. I'm trying to raise truly authentic masculine boys to become men. And I'm on that journey right now. I've got a 9-year-old son. I've got a 13-year-old son named Beckett who wants to be a priest. He chose the cross. And I've got a 16-year-old that chose the light bulb. But I just want to tell you real quickly about a journey I made in friendship in my life, because I want to spend some time today. In a minute, I'm gonna have us pray with each other. And this isn't just like at the end of it we're going to pray. I'm going to leave some time for us to pray as men. But I want to tell you about a journey I took, because when I was in junior high, I had this friend named Tim. And Tim lived one street over from me. And Tim was the stud soccer player, like little kid team, scored all the goals. He was the one that was always making the goals. He was always first, in everything. But he was my friend. And when you're little, it starts being built on utility and pleasure, right? We play together. I'm not sitting down with him at 10 years old going so tell me where you're struggling in your life. It's built around utility and pleasure, and a lot of times who our parents want us to hang out with. So we grew up together. We were best friends. We did everything together. Then we got to junior high, and you know how friend groups start to form in junior high, and you probably have some friends here with you that you've been friends with since junior high. There's probably some friends in your youth group right now. You're we used to be friends and we're not anymore. Well, that's kind of what happened with Tim and I. I started to kind of run with the faster, popular crowd, and Tim didn't. And just because of the crowd difference, I like to blame it on, we just drifted. But I knew that wasn't the case when I would walk down the hall at school and I would pass by Tim and I would act like I didn't see him. And I'm not saying this because I'm proud about it. If I look at all the friendships I've had in my life, this is one of the biggest friendship wounds I have, is the way that I treated Tim as we got older and had other sets of friends. I think I was so insecure and I was so tied to that utility and pleasure side of friendship that I lost what true, authentic brotherhood could look like. He moved away. And I never really got to say I'm sorry or goodbye. And I had this great, sadness over that. And then Facebook. And one day, he found me on Facebook and messaged me. And I was ready for oh no. And he's like, hey, Matt, how you been? I've gotten to see the things you're doing for the church on Facebook. This is great. I don't know why I'm typing like this. But, hey, Matt. But Tim could have raked me over the coals or said, man, I'm glad to see you've changed because you were a real jerk. And then he shared with me hey, I've entered the church. I'm going back to church. My family was not Catholic. I married a lady that was Catholic. We're going to church, raising our kids. And I just want to know if we could talk sometime. And I was like, I would love to talk. And I just want to say, and I finally just said it. I was I just want to say, I'm really sorry because I was a terrible friend in junior high. And I would love to think that I've grown enough to have an authentic friendship now. And he's like, hey, no worries. And he could have, right? He could have held a grudge. He said, no worries. He said, I probably wasn't the best friend when I left and didn't say goodbye. And so now we're Facebook friends. But I now have a brother, and I just texted him. I was in adoration praying before I came out to talk. And this friend of mine, he's doing music at a camp in Texas all week. And I messaged him before I came out here and said, hey, I just want to share with those boys today, those guys in the men's session. I want to share with the teens today about my friendship with you and why it means a lot to me. And I just want to tell you about my friend David, because I believe everybody needs a David in their lives. I believe everybody needs one of these kinds of friends. He will always encourage me. He reaches out at those moments, when you're gosh, I'm really feeling down, or I'm really beating myself up, or I'm feeling isolated. He reaches out. When Hurricane Harvey came through Houston, the flood was crazy. I tell you another story about that another day. But the water's rising in Houston. There's a knock at my door, and David was there 20 minutes after I told him we were without power. He took his generator from his house, put it on my front porch, and was running the generator so we could have power. And while we're doing that, our power comes back on, and I hear that my parents' house is flooded and they need to be rescued. So David, we throw, the generator back in the car, and David drives through the high water to my parents' house, and we rescue my parents on kayaks out of their house. David wasn't thinking about himself, he was thinking about me. And this is what that stretcher picture looks like, that authentic picture of authentic friendship that lays its life down for someone else. So I know right now, maybe you're still in a place of I'm trying to figure out who I am. That's okay. But I will tell you that you can figure out who you are with brothers that are trying to do it too. If you do this alone, life's going to be difficult. If you do it with brothers, life will be easier to carry. You can be someone else's stretcher bearer. So let me just close with this little video of another picture of what I think authentic friendship looks like. I'm going to go ahead here through these slides. Not to bring you back. But you might know this set of friends because I think this is the model for true brotherhood. It's not going to be easy. But I love that line. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. If you want another image of what that looks like, stand at the cross. Because maybe you've got a struggle in your life that you know you're going through. And the only way is through it and with it. But Jesus wants to reach down and carry you. And our brothers are sent here to help us carry not just the burden, but to carry you, to hold you accountable, to move from utility and pleasure to excellence. And the only way that we can access that with God is through prayer. And the only way I think today, the best way for us and the only way for us to access that sacrificial love that God wants to give us is if we pray together as brothers. So I want you to we're going to take a step today. This might be a step out in faith, but I want John Paul to come up here and kind of model this for me, and I'm sorry, for you, but with me. And so the way this will look in a minute, I'll explain how it looks, like what the mechanics of this look like. And some of you, I realize, like, maybe some of you have already gone to confession. Maybe some of you haven't. So this isn't like confession, like I need to tell my friends, like, all my worst, things that are going on in my life. So it's only what you're comfortable with, but I do want it to be about you. And let me explain what I mean. A lot of times when you say, like, John Paul, what do you need prayer for?
Could you pray for, like, peace in the world?
Okay, I stop. That's one. That's a good thing, right?
And that the Packers win the Super Bowl.
The Packers.
Pray for their healing.
How about like pray for grandma?
Pray for grandma.
Or my dog.
My dog, yeah.
Those are all good things. You can pray for them. But what I want us to do is when I say, John Paul, what do you need prayer for? This could be around like your identity or masculinity or a relationship or what you need in a friendship or like something you need like support in or encouragement in. But it's for you personally, specifically. It is not selfish to ask for prayer. So I want you to focus on what you need as men here in this conference from your brothers. What kind of prayer you would need. So,
yeah, and
John Paul, what do you need for prayer for today?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, like, literally, like, as I'm like, oh, I know what's going to happen next. Like, I'm called up here, he's going to ask me. And just to, like, full disclosure, like, it makes me a little, like, I'm, like, feel a little on the spot or a little nervous. Like, I think that's a natural feeling. Like, I've done stuff like this, and I have brothers, too, but I still feel, like, a little bit. And I think that it shows you, like, oh, my gosh, there's something there that's, like, really important to me that I feel like I need to protect. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. It's like, it does feel a little uncomfortable. I think, like, this week especially, I was, like, just thinking, in like a really real way, I think I was just, like, impatient, like a few times this week with my wife, and it's like, then I come up and lead worship, and then there's, like, this tension in me that's like, am I a fraud? And it's so, like, that whole thing, but that is, that's just showing, like, I have a struggle. So like we said in worship this morning, it's like, I'm a sinner, you're a sinner, Matt's a sinner, Father Lewis is a sinner. We all need a Savior, and it doesn't negate us from praying. It doesn't negate us from seeking mercy. Sometimes there's, like, that shame. So those are the things that are like real in my life. Is saying, like, am I still loved by God in the same way, even though I've fallen short? Yeah.
Well, thanks for telling 500 of your closest friends that as well. But we're gonna pray for
brothers.
That's great support. So we're just gonna pray for John Paul right now. I'm gonna put my hand here on his shoulder. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Hand on his shoulder, and I'm just going to pray for him just to give you a model of what that could look like once someone shares how they would need prayer, okay? And by the way, if you're like, I'm not good praying out loud, or I'm not comfortable, with words, saying that, then you can pray silently too, but just make sure at the end you would say, like, amen, so they know you're done, right? So this doesn't go till tonight, and you're like, I'm not sure how to stop this, but still praying, kind of hungry. Okay, so let's pray for John Paul.